So picture this, if you will. A child sitting cross-legged, elbows on the knees, chin in the hands, looking wide-eyed at a grandparent as the story of the good old days is being told. Now this child listens and does not question what that grandparent is saying, but instead is amazed at the way things used to be. There is a sense of innocence as this child enjoys hearing what life was like for that grandparent. Now, I used to be that child. When my grandma would talk about her life growing up, I was continually amazed by what life was like for her. She used to tell me about how little things would cost and how they would keep their doors unlocked at night. I never once questioned what she was telling me. I had the innocence to believe every word that came out of her mouth. How about this one? When a little child is scared and we tell them that everything will be okay and that they are safe. I can't count the number of times that we have to tell little Frankie that he is okay and that Daddy and Mommy will keep him safe and protect him. Now, little kids trust what Mommy and Daddy tell them and will follow their parents wherever they go. There is a sense of innocence that Mommy and Daddy will never let this child down. Unfortunately, there are kids in this world who have parents who do not keep them safe, nor do they do everything to protect their children. It is in moments like that when the innocence begins to break in a child. And then that innocence also begins to break as we simply just grow up and gain more knowledge for ourselves. We begin to realize that our parents are not able to protect us from everything that is out there, and therefore they are unable to keep us completely safe. So in turn, we start to question some of the things that we hear our parents say to us. Then they decide to teach us how to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe from what is out there in this world today. This loss of innocence continues as we come to understand the world around us more fully. When we see bad things happen to good people, people we love and cherish, then we ask, why would God do these things? We question where God is in times like these, and to be completely honest, there is not always a good answer. We see things like 9/11 take place. Then we see things like the Paris attacks. Then more recently, we see horrible things like the Orlando shootings and the slaying of those 5 Dallas cops. When the police who are there to keep us safe are taken out by evil, how can they protect us? This is a question that many ask. It is when we see these horrors take place that we begin to question God and ask if He really wants to protect us. It is in these moments that we begin to lose the trusting innocence in God. So if you were sitting at home and you looked up and saw 3 strangers standing near your home, you may tend to be a little suspicious. I know I would be wondering who they are and if they are here to sell me something or do even worse. However, Abraham met those 3 strangers and he bowed to them. As it says in Genesis 18:3, he said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant." Abraham had faith without question that these men were sent by God to visit him and his wife, and his faith was not shaken. He asked his wife to make cakes using their best flour, as well as choosing a good calf to be prepared for a welcoming meal. This was a man who had that childlike, innocent faith. He did not question the fact that God had sent those visitors to him. Abraham's faith was so strong that he was willing to do anything that he could to please these 3 men, and therefore he was rewarded. They informed him that when they return, his wife would have a son. Abraham and Sarah wanted nothing more than to have a child. And it would be because of their faith that they would be richly rewarded. Interestingly enough, God would eventually test Abraham and his faith again, and then too he would be rewarded for his faith. Now, how many of us today have that much faith in God that we would provide our best meal for a stranger, trusting that they would be people sent from God? I will go out on a limb and say that in our world today, we are unlikely to show such blind trust in a stranger. When I look at children today, I can see that sense of awe and wonder in the world like Abraham had for God, and I am continually amazed at how honest young children can be. Some of the most innocent people in this world today are these children. They speak from their heart and truly are the most blameless. We need to try to keep that same innocence when we grow into adulthood and deal with the negativity that we experience from day to day. By keeping that childlike innocence, we will in turn be rewarded by God for striving to be good followers. Who will dwell with the Lord? Our psalm lesson today makes it clear when it says in verse 2 that those who walk blamelessly and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart. We would be at our most blameless when we begin to turn back to trusting that God will guide us and protect us in all that we do. It is when we look to God's teachings and do what is right and speak the truth from our hearts that we will be rewarded and allowed to live on the Lord's holy hill. Much like making the choice to go to seminary and becoming your student pastor, these can be very terrifying changes to make, not just for myself, but for my wife and kids. It is with childlike innocence and trust in God that I can make these changes and moves necessary, because I believe that the Lord is placing me where I need to be. I then trust that, like a parent, God will protect my family and myself and will keep us safe. It is not easy to take these kinds of leaps in life, especially when they not only affect you, but your family as well. By making these kinds of choices, we need to do our best to stay true and close to God. Now, I have situations where I become distracted by the world around me. And then all I want to do is deal with those distractions and forget to take time to sit and listen to God. Now, this is where we come to our gospel lesson today, talking about Martha and Mary. Mary, wanting to listen to Jesus, simply sat at his feet as he spoke, much like that child listening to a grandparent. She knew that listening to Jesus was where she needed to be at that time. Now, when I think of Mary, I think that many of us do not spend as much time as we should reading God's Word, spending time in prayer, and simply striving to listen. We all need moments where we stop just to simply listen. Instead, we all tend to be more like Martha in the story. She was so focused on wanting to make sure all the work in the home was done. She wanted things to be just right for this wonderful visitor who had come into her home. And she became distracted by the many tasks that needed to be done. Now, in our daily lives, we become too distracted by the things that we need to get done to find that perfection in our lives. In our jobs, we hopefully strive to do our best. And we do that because our jobs enable us to afford our homes, food, clothing, and all other things that make our lives enjoyable. We spend years providing for our children to the extent that many of us end up putting our own desires on that back burner, only to work harder to make sure that we can live the lives we want once our kids are gone. We want our homes to be as perfect as possible, so better to enjoy our time away from work. We like to make sure that we have all our needs taken care of, and then to go a step further to ensure that our children have what they need and, when appropriate, what they want. Then and only then do we provide for our own wants and desires. But by struggling to provide all these things, we continue to be distracted. We seemingly never have the time to spend just simply sitting at the feet of our Lord, listening. More than not, we struggle to manage all the distractions in life just to find even 5 minutes of time to listen to God. In turn, all these distractions lure us further and further from being that innocent child sitting at the feet of the Lord. Perhaps, like Martha, we complain that others are not doing their share and thus leaving all their work to us. Like when Martha said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all that work by myself? Tell her to help me." More often than not, we are too busy with our distractions to hear the Lord telling us, like He did to Martha, "You are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing." That one thing would be to simply sit at His feet and listen. Many of our distractions will not fully go away, no matter how much time we give to them. So we need to put them down for a moment and come to God with that innocence, like a child. I was recently reading a Christian magazine about people who work with youth in churches and the problems that they're facing. I was struck by a story of a teenage boy who was struggling with faith, but not in such a way that he was causing a problem for the others in his youth group. It was that he was not feeling like his faith was being challenged, and he even said that he thought Christianity was too easy. Now, this article did not go into much more detail about his struggle, but I tend to read into this that he is thinking about all that is happening in the world around us. When we do this, we can't help but wonder why certain bad things happen, and we need to find answers within our faith. Although I believe that God does want us to question, I do also trust that when we seek and find the answers, it will only strengthen our faith and trust in God. Ultimately, Christianity can be very easy. Like Leslie Newbigin says in his book, A Walk Through the Bible, out of sheer love, God desired to create a world to reflect His glory and a human family to enjoy His world and give back His love. It's that simple. We can give back His love when we trust in Him and believe that He will protect us and keep us safe, like that innocent child, trusting that their parent will keep them safe from any harm. Now, Newbigin continues by saying, God will not leave us until He has won us back to be His children. God will continue to work in our hearts until we have turned back to Him. So I implore you all today to come to the foot of God with that same innocence, like a child, and to simply listen. Love and peace to you all today.